Who here has heard of the Maggid Midubna? Have you heard of the Maggid Midubna? He lived in the times of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon. And I'm just going to show you now a few of his
Where did he live?
His name was Rabbi Yaakov Krantz. He lived in Lithuania, mainly in Lithuania, the 18th century, in the times of the Vilna Gaon. And there's something very unique. There's something very unique about him. I'll tell you in just one moment. He wasn't part of the Hasidic movement. He's not considered a Chassid, but there is a reason why we are going to talk about him this shir. So here we go. Okay, perfect. So the Maggid Midubna had something very special about him that other rabbis didn't really have. His whole way was to explain a certain idea through bringing a mashal. A mashal is, the word is a parable, right? Mm-hmm. And he used to tell a story. And he used to tell the story, and through that story, you understood a certain idea. So I'll tell you a typical story of the Maggid Midubna, and this is about Shavuos Nat.
About?
Shavuos Nat, Leil Shavuot, the night of Shavuot, right? What happens on the night of Shavuot is that we sit and learn Torah all night. Some traditions say that we should just read what's called the Tikkun. The Tikkun is basically psukim, verses, chapters from Torah, Nevi'im, Suvim, Mishnah, to take a bit of every part of the Torah and to learn it. That is one tradition. But other traditions say it's time for learning, actual real learning, Shiurim, Gemara. So once the Maggid Midubna was learning Gemara. He wasn't learning the Tikkun, and the Vilna Gaon came over to him and asked him, why are you not saying the Tikkun like I'm saying? Why do you prefer to learn a sugya?
Is this meant Tikkun Chatzot?
Similar to Tikkun Chatzot. Similar, but it's Tikkun Leil Shavuot. It's the night of Shavuot where we say verses of every part of the Torah. So he told him a story in reply. To answer this question, he told him that there was once a young married person that after his wedding, he didn't do much. He wasn't involved in anything. And his father-in-law asked him, why aren't you starting to work, to do something, if it's business or anything else? Why aren't you getting involved in something? So this Avrech, this young guy said, and who knows how to do business? I don't know. I didn't learn in university or anything like that. I don't know how to do business. So he said, go to the market, and in the market, look at how the dealers, how they act, what exactly the dealers do. And the exact same thing that they do, you do. Copy them. That's doing business, right? So he went to the market, and then he sees something very interesting, that all the dealers, the merchants, right, they put samples in the entrance to their store of what they have in the store. Samples, if it's one suit, or if it's one pair of shoes, or if it's just the material that they use. So he figured out, you know what, this is a great idea. He went, and, sorry? No, not that. He went, so he went to the manufacturers, and he started getting also these samples. And he got these samples, and he rented a store, and he hung them up. He put them on the wall so they can see the samples of what he sells. You know, one shoe, just the right shoe, then just one shirt, and then just one suit, one hat. So he comes into the store. His father-in-law is very happy, and his father-in-law comes into the store and he sees all the nice samples in the window, and he comes in, but he sees that the whole store is empty. So he told him, was this a joke? He said, what? You told me to copy what they do. I saw that they put their samples. I did the same thing. That was a parable that the Maggid Midubna told. Who knows what connection there is between the story, which is an interesting story, and their discussion before. Perfect. And instead, and if you just use the samples, that's the point that it was bringing out. The ticket is just samples, and if you just have samples without the original material, not material, but the original product, and in enough quantity, you can't open a store, right?
You can say, if you preach and you don't do, it's the same. No.
If you
preach, do this, do that. Don't you say preach?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So this is the Maggid Midubna. Why are we talking about the Maggid Midubna? And why are we talking about this interesting story?
Is that the rock and all these martial from the folk stories?
The folk stories, also from the Maggid Midubna.
Is that the same?
I don't know the source of the folk stories, and in Hasidus we don't much learn about the idea of Mishalim. We do use parables in certain cases, but not stories to bring out a certain idea. But it's the stories and the Mishalim are all great things. You know, if we can learn from them lessons in Avodat Hashem, so it's something great. In any case, why are we talking about parables and about stories and interesting rabbis? So the simple answer is that we are trying to connect Havaya and Elokim together. We are trying to connect Hashem to the world and trying to explain, what is this world that we are in? Does it have a true existence? Is there no existence to the world? What type of existence this world has? And for that reason, it's a great example to speak about a parable. Because the idea of a parable is that there's two sides to the story. There's the person giving over the parable, and there's the person hearing the parable. And those are two different ways and two different meanings to the story. The person telling the story, what does he see in the story? He sees the message, he sees the light, he sees the idea behind the story. He doesn't really see the story. He made up the story, right? It's not a true story that ever happened. I doubt that it happened, such a thing that a person just went and bought samples. But it's to represent and bring out a certain idea. And in the eyes of the person giving this idea, his focus isn't on the story, but it's on the idea that he's trying to transfer. And on the other hand, the person hearing the parable, why does it drag our ear? Why does it bring our attention? Because it's an interesting story. And if the rabbi would tell you that story, you might get stuck at the story and you'd say, well, it's a great story, let's end it there. It doesn't mean much. There's no real meaning behind it. Don't tell me the nimshal, which is basically the idea that comes out of the story. I enjoy the story enough. That is, yes, Yaakov.
Are the parables in the Chumash?
Good question. So we just learned not long ago, we learned the story of Balak and Bilam, right? Bilam the prophet. Bil'am, some of his words there are mysterious words. And that could also be a parable to certain ideas. And the whole idea of dreams, right? When it's Yosef HaTzadik, that's a certain parable. It's a dream. The dream of Pharaoh, right? He had a dream, he didn't know the meaning of it. That's a parable. So back to the... So yeah, and this is chapter 6. This is what chapter 6 is all about. Chapter 6 is all about understanding how these two names work together. On the one hand, we have the name Havaye. The name Havaye is the name that represents the light of Hashem, the strong light, the unlimited light, kindness, right? Chesed. It represents the idea of giving, unlimited giving. And then on the other hand, we have the Shem Elohim. Elohim is restriction.
It's not that Shem Havaye is the creator of the reality, and Shem Elohim it's who has the strong, who has the kochot.
Koach.
Yeah.
Fair, very good. So you are right. Shem Havaye is the starting point of the creation. And Shem Elohim is also connected to creation in the way of koach. Which means koach is, what koach do you have? What koach does he have? What koach do I have? What is the koach of a cup? Which means, how do we bring out the Shem Havaya, which is light, pure light? But we want to accept the light. We want to define it. We want to translate it into koach, or into teva, the nature. That is why we have a combination of the two. That is why we are combining two different things. We are combining, on the one hand, the name of Hashem Havaye, which is the beginning of the creation, the light of the creation, but that needs a restriction. You know, it's like too much light. When there's too much light, you can't see. A blind person, in the words of Aramaic, I think we mentioned it once, how do we call a person that's blind in Aramaic? Sorry?
I think it's in Hebrew.
In Hebrew it's Iver. In Aramaic it's Sagi Nehor. What is Sagi Nehor? Sagi Nehor means a lot of light. Sagi is a lot, Nehor is light, or.
So why it's important to unify, to make unification between Havaye and Elohim?
Great question, because this is exactly the topic. First of all, it says it in the Pasuk. Ki Hashem hu Elohim, bashamayim mima'al, ve'yadata hayom v'ashevot ha'ele vavecha. You should know in your mind, and you should return to your heart. Ki Havaye hu ha'Elohim. That Havaye is Elohim. So it says it in the Pasuk. So that's one reason that we've got to first of all know this. And second of all, that if we don't connect the two names of Havaye and Elohim, so it seems like there's something covering and disturbing Havaye. And as it says in the other verse that we spoke about, Shemesh umagen Havaye Elohim. Shemesh umagen means that the sun and the shield are compared to Havaye and Elohim. So we might think that, you know what, there's the sun. And Hashem, Havaye, is connected to the sun. And then there's the shield, the Magen, and that's Elohim, and that tries to disturb Shem Havaye. And we don't want to cause any type of clash between the two names, because it's all one entity. It's one existence. So this is basically what we are going to try and understand. This is our focus on Perek Vav, the 6th chapter. So let's start, and we're going to begin on, with the word now. That's the beginning of our chapter. And Hanoch, would you like to read for us the beginning of it? Yeah, thank you. So we're going to start here now.
Now the name Elohim is the name which indicates the attribute of Gevurah and Tzimtzum, Hence it is also numerically equal to Hateva, nature, for as Elohim conceals the supernal nature, light, which brings the world into existence and gives it life. And it appears as though the world exists and conducts itself in a natural way. And this name, Elohim, is a shield and a covering for the name Havaya, to conceal the light and life force which flows from the name Havaya and brings creation into existence from naught, so that the light and life force should be revealed to the creatures, who thereby would become absolutely nullified.
Should not be.
The quality of Gevurah.
Okay, let's just stop for one moment. Thank you, Hanoch. Because this brings out an important idea that sometimes we might think that the name Elokim is a name that is only about restriction and about withdrawal and not to bring life to the world. But the truth is, and as you pointed out at the beginning, that Elokim is Koach, right? What is your name?
Michael.
Michael. So welcome, Michael, to the Shiur. You pointed out a very good point, that the Shem Elokim is Koach, which basically also brings a certain amount of life to the world. That you can define this light of Hashem, because the name Havaya is too general. The light that comes from Havaya is too general, it's too powerful. We want to take the name Elokim and we want to, create something out of it. Right? That's what we can see over here in this chapter, and that's why the name Elokim isn't that bad. So we shouldn't look at the name Elokim and say, you know what, that's a name that covers and disturbs. It's not bad. It's the name that expresses the meaning of Havaya. Let's continue. Sorry?
Chesed should be Gevurah.
So that's it. We'll speak about the Chesed should be Gevurah in a moment. That's the next coming up idea. Let's see. So Mordechai, please read for us the quality of Gevurah.
This quality of Gevurah and Tzitzis Zoom is also a quality of Chesed.
Tzimtzum, right? That's restriction, in other words.
It's also a quality of Chesed, for through it, Tzimtzum and Gevurah, the world is built. And this is the quality of Gevurah, which is included in Chesed. For the inclusion of the attributes one in the other, it is evident that he and his attributes are one. For since they are a complete unity with him, they therefore unite with each other and are comprised of each other. As Eliyahu said, and you are he who binds the attributes together and unites them, and aside from you, there is no unity among those above. Perfect, thank you. So here we bring out once again this idea that the name Elokim isn't that bad after all. Not only it's not bad, but it's good. It creates something. And you said that there's a combination of the midot of Gevurah Sheba Chesed, Chesed Sheba Gevurah, and this is important to discuss. And let's talk about it, because we're not in the process of the days of Sfirat HaOmer. Sfirat HaOmer is all about the attributes and the combinations. But let's still talk about it. There is the combination of Chesed Sheba Gevurah, and this is basically what the name Elokim does. Elokim takes kindness, the light of Hashem Havayim, and puts it into perspective. Who wants to give me an example of pure kindness, only Chesed, looking only for Chesed, no Gevurah involved? Some kind of example.
A mother feeding the baby.
Okay, that's a good example. What about a father giving his child a knife? How do you like that?
No.
Giving his child a knife, a 6-year-old child, or he gives him matches to play with matches.
That's irresponsible.
Not responsible, right?
Right.
So a person that's full of kindness would give his son a knife if his son asks for it. Because he does not know limits, he does not know limitations, he does not know any type of restriction. He's all about giving, he's all about sharing. And in that case, he would give his son whatever he wants, even if it's something that can cause him damage and can harm. And that is why we need the restriction. That's why the restriction is something good. That's why the restriction adds. Because you cannot give a little child a knife. You cannot give him a candle that's burning, right? If you do that, it would cause him damage. You aren't actually doing kindness to him. That is where we see a combination of chesed and gevurah. That's where we see the two connecting, and not only connecting, but optimizing each other. Because kindness alone is bad, restrictions alone are bad. Who has an example of restriction, of gevurah? Generally speaking, every aveira is gevurah. Din, right? But a typical example of gevurah is someone that you see someone beating up someone else for no reason. There's no reason. And in that case, that is pure gevurah. That is a case where there's no benefit and there's no good, and there's even to the extent where it's harshness. That's where sometimes we translate gevurah in a way of harshness, and or a judgmental way. Someone that gets judged in an extreme way, in a way where we can't when we can't see any good part of this person. And that is why gevurah itself is also not good enough. And we need the combination of the two. Let's continue and let's see. And slowly but surely, we are trying to unify these two ideas of gevurah and chesed, which is the two names of Hashem. So, Benish, please read for us. We're starting from the line this.
Then this then is the meaning of which is written, and take unto your heart that Haviah is Elohim. That is, these two names are actually one, for even the name Elohim, which contracts, conceals the light, is the quality of chesed, just as the name Haviah.
Interesting. So here we can see that they're basically the same names, right? They're the same ideas. Let's see a bit more.
So the attributes of the Holy One, blessed be He, unite with Him in complete unity, and He and His name are one. For His attributes are His names. Since this is so, you will consequently know that in the heavens above and on the earth below, there is nothing else besides God.
Great. So this is also very important, because what is the pasuk? Yaakov, can you quote for us the pasuk V'yadata hayom v'ashivotat from Aleinu? What is the pasuk? En od. It's interesting. En od, and this is what you just read, that there's something about connecting the names Haviah and Elohim that we say that there's nothing else. En od, which means that nothing exists. And this is the core of Shaar Hayichud. Once again, what are we trying to understand here? We're trying to understand the true definition and meaning of the existence that we see around us. The table that we see around us, ourselves, everything that we have around us. What is it? Does it exist or not? So if we take the name Elohim, we'd say it exists. Hashem created a certain nature, and the nature has powers of itself, and that's what it is. It exists. And then if we take the name Havaya, Havaya represents the other side of things. Havaya represents the idea that nothing exists, that it's all one unlimited light of Hashem. And here we've got to combine between the two. And this is what we're trying to do. And that combination, understanding the true meaning and definition of Elokim and how it's united with Havaya, that will bring us to the conclusion that En Od, that there's nothing else. And the things that we see outside don't really have an existence. What does that mean? Is it fake? Fake news? No. It's not fake. The Torah tells us to put on tefillin. Is that fake? Is the leather fake? Is an esrog, is that fake? Chas v'shalom to say such a thing. Hashem, more than that, Hashem says you'll be rewarded for the mitzvot that you do. If there's reward, it means that it's true. Hashem's saying that this is a meaningful thing in my eyes. So it's a true thing. We're not living in a virtual world, right? You know that there's, today, it's very big, the whole thing of virtual world. They have VR, which is virtual reality, augmented reality. There's metaverse. Have you heard of metaverse? They opened the first Bet Chabad on metaverse, right?
It's like Facebook.
It's like Facebook,
Well,
but
yes,
the next generation. A different game, exactly.
Rabbi, in the Chumash we read that Moshe asked God to God, show me your Chabad. And God answers, you can't see my Chabad. You can see only my back.
My back.
Which means you don't see it now. You will see
Oh,
it
yes,
much later.
Yes.
We don't know if we are still alive or after we are in the Olam Haemet.
So I'll tell you, we do know, because Hashem tells us, do these mitzvot. He doesn't say it in vain. You're right that La'atid Lavo, we're going to see how these two names really unite, and we'll understand the true meaning of Havaya and Elokim. But at this point, that's why we are breaking our brains here to try and figure it out, because we can't see it. And that's why it says, in the Pasuk it says, I'll give you the exact quote that shows that it's about the future. And that in the future, let's see. Okay, I don't see here the exact quote, but the true time that we'll actually understand this, not only understand it, feel it, and be able to see it, the unity between the names of Hashem and the attributes of Hashem, is in the future, in the times of Mashiach.
So these are only the words of the Rabbanim.
Yes, and this is what we've got to work on. And I'll tell you, when a person moves to the next world, to Olam Haba, there he sees a bit more of an unlimited world, where the name Havaya is more in control, whereas it's more expressed. And we spoke about the 4 worlds that are above this world. Each world is higher and higher. In what aspect? In what way? It's not that there's an actual world there. There's no elevator to the next world. It's a deeper light and a deeper feeling of bitul, of nil.
Miyesh Ayin.
Ayin. We are going more to the ayin. It's not that it doesn't exist, but the feeling and the understanding is that it's all from Hashem. So, let's go back to the text. Let's read a bit more. Reb Tzvi, would you like to please read for us? This means.
This means that even the material earth, which appears to the eyes of all to be actually existing, is not in complete nothingness in relation to the Holy One, blessed be He. For the name Elohim conceals and contracts the light and life force only for the lower creatures, but not for the Holy One, blessed be He, since He and His name Elohim are one. Therefore, even the earth and that which is below it are not in complete nothingness in relation to the Holy One, blessed be He, and are not called by any name at all, not even the name Od. which is an expression indicating a secondary subordinate status, as the statement of our sages of blessed memory, Yehuda Va'od Yisrael.
Okay,
unlike
so
the body which is subordinate to the soul and life force within it, and is referred to as Od. And this is the meaning of the verse, I will praise Haviah with my life, soul, and will sing to Elohim Va'odi with my body.
Why couldn't we say,
For the soul is derived from the name Haviah, and the Od, which is the body, the subordinate of the soul from the name Elohim. For the soul does not bring the body into existence ex nihilo. Hence it can be called Od in relation to the soul. But the Holy One, blessed be He who brings everything into existence ex nihilo, everything is absolutely nullified in relation to it. Just as the light of the sun is nullified in the sun.
perfect.
so why couldn't we say also all our behavior?
Sorry?
Why couldn't we say that also all of our behavior is not? Nothing. Including
Great question.
Including mitzvahs.
Including mitzvahs. Chas v'shalom to say such, right? Because Hashem tells us to put on tefillin, so we can't say that it's nothing. So this is where it becomes a bit complicated. But let's start, first of all, with what he begins at, saying that everything is nothing. It's all fake, right? That's what he says. So remember, we spoke about the parable. That is the whole idea. When the rabbi or the teacher or the friend, whoever it is, tells you a parable, his focus isn't on the parable. He sees straight through the parable. What does he see? The message behind the parable. What does the person that hears the parable see? The story. And if he's lucky and wise enough, he'll also understand the meaning of the story. What's behind the story. And that is the tricky part that we have here. When Hashem creates the world with the name Havaya and the name Elohim, which truly exist, in his eyes, all he sees is the message behind it. He doesn't see the actual bottle here. He sees the meaning of the bottle. And certain rabbis, we spoke about, I think, the Mittler Rebbe, or the Alter Rebbe, that they spoke between each other, and they said, what did you daven with on this Yom Kippur? So the Mittler Rebbe said, I davened with this high level. And the Alter, Adam Kadmon, which in Kabbalic books, it's a very high level. And the Alter Rebbe himself said, what I davened with is with my Stender. What does that mean with my Stender? You know what a Stender is, right? It's this. Maybe he had an advanced one, that one over there, right? So he says that he davens with his Stender, he means with understanding that Hashem is the one that every single moment brings this life to the Stender in order to create it. So that is basically the difference between the two. So on the one hand, the mitzvahs are real. We live in a real world. This isn't a metaverse. But, and that's why we have to keep mitzvot. That's why it means a lot if a person eats kosher or not, puts on tefillin or not, keeps Shabbos or not, because this is a real world. This is not a virtual world. But in the eyes of Hashem, the way that Hashem sees the world, he's looking at the world in a way of what is the message. The message, what is the idea behind the physical objects. We're not saying that the physical objects don't exist. Some religions do. Some religions are all about saying how the world is fake. That's not the way Judaism approaches things. And the Rebbe put a big emphasis on benefiting from the world and elevating the world to the extent that the world is important. We're talking about vows in our parsha. Sometimes it says that it's bad to say a certain vow. Why? Why is it bad? If a person says, I'm never going to drink wine in my life. In certain places in the Gemara, it's a bad thing to do. Why? He's more of a holy person. He's more of a tzaddik. No. Because Hashem wants to to benefit from the world and to elevate the world, because there is something behind it. But our definition that we bring to the world is that the world has its own power, and the world exists, and we don't see the life that Hashem brings every moment, oxygen to bring it to life. Hashem sees His words constantly bringing life, and that's why it depends on the angle that we look at things. Yes, Yaakov.
Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
Yeah.
They perform all the mitzvahs.
Right.
But the idea of the mitzvahs, not the mitzvahs themselves.
It's a good example. Very good example.
Because the mitzvahs in their eyes, they didn't exist. They were not there yet. And they might have been a parable.
Very good.
Like all the Chumash might be.
Chumash itself is what it is, but I'll tell you, the Chumash itself says that Yaakov did tefillin with the sticks, which is again because in those days it was more important to focus on the meaning and less on the object, the physical object.
Yes. And
that's the idea of this world. That if you can approach and look at the way where the thing is, the kavanah, the idea behind it, that's the way that Hashem looks at things.
It is good. Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. Could it be the same for us? To go beyond.
Right, so it's a good point.
To go beyond the parable.
Right. The Rebbe says that there was one mitzvah that Avraham Avinu waited until he did. He waited. Bris Milah. All the other mitzvahs Avraham did immediately because he knew Hashem wants me to do this. Right? There was one mitzvah that he didn't wait. Why? So Hasidah says, because that is the Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. He waited for a command from Hashem, and he did it not in a parable way. He did it originally in the exact same way that we do it today. Because that shows us that the true idea of the mitzvot, that the Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, is doing it in a physical and a real way like we do it now. The Avot were not obligated, and if you're not obligated, you can do it if you want. You don't have to do it if you don't want. So that is that case. But in a case where you are obligated, that's a different story totally, and that's where you do the real deal.
Not that I agree with this, not with what you said, but let's take and not performing a mitzvah Jew. And he says, Ben Adam lechavero, I do. Ben Adam lamakom, I do it my way. And he does it his way. It's praiseworthy.
Yeah, but you can't change the Torah.
He doesn't change the Torah. He doesn't know the Torah. He never learned the Torah. Nobody taught him the Torah.
So it's a good question, and this is a question that happens many times. I used to do mivtzoim, putting on tefillin, in Manhattan when I learned in New York in 770.
Oh, you lived in Manhattan, in New York?
In New York for 1 year in the yeshiva there.
Yeshiva was in Manhattan?
No, the yeshiva was in 770 in Brooklyn, yeah, for sure. We used to go to do mivtzoim, so sometimes I used to go sometimes to
Wall Street.
No, it was
easy
to put on tefillin.
Upper West Side.
Sorry?
The Upper West Side?
I don't remember exactly. So there was one that was on 54th Street, close to Central Park.
I know that area.
And
the area of the rings, of the diamonds.
I'm not.
That's more 47. 47th Street.
45. So there's a nice building of offices, and we used to go in. There was this person that constantly told us what you're saying. He said, listen, why do I need to put on tefillin? I'm a good person. I donate. I volunteer. I'm a good person. The truth is that this is a good enough topic for a shiur for itself. Mm-hmm. But the basis to this idea is understanding that there is, when you buy a new product, you always get what's called a guide. Right, where they tell you how to operate it. Instructions, exactly.
Instruction manual.
Instruction manual. So
These days it's
you
online,
get.
though.
Sorry.
I think these days it's online, though.
Sometimes it's online, but anyways, you've got to go according to the instructions, right? If you put the wrong fuel into your car, so it will damage your engine. So there's Hashem who created the world and who defines what is good and what is bad, and what is a mitzvah and what is not. So
Here it is.
it's a lack of knowledge.
You don't get any instructions for any of the products that you buy.
You don't get.
Right, Gabriel?
You've got to figure it out yourself.
You can figure out
There's
yourself.
no customer service.
So, and the example sometimes in order to bring out this idea, because people say, honestly, I'm a good person. You're right, you are a good person. I'm not saying that you're not a good person, but there's getting your car serviced at just a random musach, and there's getting your car serviced at the original dealer. Right, and if you want an insurance, you've got to go to the original dealer. You can't.
This is a mashal.
That's a mashal, yeah.
We don't look at the mashal.
You don't look at it. You go straight in. Very good. You see, so that's it. We can Baruch Hashem, holding in a good place. So the extreme case that they bring, and the Rebbe spoke about it a few times, is not Nazi Germany, 1933, 1939 until 1945, where they considered themselves good people. In their eyes, they were good people. Something that sometimes it's hard for us to understand. Where did they get that from? But they consider themselves to be good people, and and that is where you can point and you can say, you know what? You've got to understand that there's a higher authority than you. It's not based on your understanding or your feelings, that He decides what's good or bad. And that's Hashem, and that's the Torah. No other way about it. Even if people say, I'm totally against them, yes. But that shows that you can't rely on what you understand is good or bad. At a certain point, and sometimes you can see it, then you saw it on the right, the extreme right, and here you see it in the extreme left. And without politics, because we don't speak here politics, but we are facing, and this is something that I don't remember who said, but he said if we'll ever come to a point like we faced with Nazi Germany, it won't be from the right side, it will be from the left side, where people on the left will enforce what they think is right and good. And you know what? Maybe certain people will say, you know what, in my eyes, this is total good. This is total good. So who is the one that defines and says you've got to draw the line over here and this is good or this is bad? The Creator. And that's why we follow the worlds of the Torah straight without any questions. About politics, left or right? No. Okay.
It's about nullification. So we hear this a great deal, that a ray of light has existence, but within the source, the sun, there's nullification. But the sun is actually the compilation of all these rays of light. So it's not nullified.
That's it, right. It's just that we can't separate the two, and we can't see one without the other. And there's a true understanding that once it's in the sun itself, it's bebitul, which means you link the two together. So the idea is that here in this world, I might say, you know what, if I would not know the idea of the sun, I would say the world produces light from 5 in the morning until 8:30 at night. That's what I would say. I would disconnect the two. But if you take a travel to the sun and you see that actually the light comes there, you understand that it's nullified in a way where you know that there's a creator, so to speak. That it comes from a certain point, a certain source. And this is exactly what we're trying to explain about the world. We are so involved in the parable, in the light that's far away, that we can't see the creator. We can't see how it's truly a reflection of the creator in a certain way.
But this is the will of God.
And it's the will of God. That's why it's like this. But the fact is that we are too much stuck into the parable, and we don't see how it's nullified in the Creator. So it's not that there's no sun, on the contrary, there's no light. On the contrary, there's more of a light up there than here, because it comes from there. What is the difference, that there we link the light to the sun. And we say, you know what, why is there a light? Because of the sun. Here, there might be certain conspiracies that say that there's nothing to do with the sun. That's just a star over there. But this light that we get outside is because that there's this kind of, I'm enjoying this conspiracy, I think maybe this, maybe that the world itself provides and creates.
It's independent.
Independently. And that is the point of Shaar Hayichud. Understanding how the world is a reflection of Hashem. How this is just a parable.
Filtered world. Yeah, you can use those bottles for a few days afterwards. You have to throw them away.
So we still have a few things to discuss over here. One of the things is comparing the soul, right? We have the soul and the body that he speaks about. We're going to talk about this next week, Bezrat Hashem. That's the plan.
On Sunday?
No, on Tuesday, Bezrat Hashem.
That's chapter 4.
Sorry.
Chapter 4.
This is chapter 6.
Right.
Chapter 6.
In our class.
In the class, we up to we finished chapter 4. We chapter 5. Chapter 5. We've got 2 more. Bezrat Hashem, 2 more courses, 2 more lessons.
Wow, it's leaning tower piece.
Yeshar Koach. So thank you very much for coming, taking part.